Assalamu alaikum and good evening, everyone. So, thank you all for joining our webinar today. This webinar is being presented by Salman Khimani. He is Aga Khan Education Board's board member and he is currently a faculty at Habib University. So, Salman, if you can begin, over to you. Uh, During the session, you guys can send in your questions if you have any on the chat box. Chat box is available
Thank you,
at the
Munir,
end
for
of
the
this session.
just a quick correction on my introduction. I'm affiliated with Habib University right now, but I'm not a faculty member there. I'm part of the administration there. So let's begin the session today. I generally tend to speak much longer than the assigned time to me, but I'll try and keep this session for about 40 to 45 minutes, and I will be happy to take questions towards the end. So today we will speak about university selection. And again, because I've had experience of doing career advising on a collective and individual basis for many years, what I will be sharing today is based on my experience of past, say about 15 years, but also some of my reflections that I've come across from my own experience when I was planning for undergraduate education. So this session that we have today will cover primarily 5 questions. What comes first, field of study or university? And I think that's a question a lot of us struggle with. क्या हम university select करें पहले या field of study करें? और हमेशा ये एक अलमिया हमारी life में रहा है. So we'll tackle this question in detail today. We'll also try and answer a question, when should I start thinking about universities? And so not only in terms of timelines, but how it's very important to start planning at the right time. We'll also talk about how do we evaluate different choices, which means that if I am able to get into different universities, or even if I am planning to get into different universities, how do I evaluate those choices? Then if you are able to make all these plans and you have shortlisted your universities and you're prepared for them, what if you are unable to afford these universities? So often you have the talent, you have the merit to go to top universities, but the question of finances, the question of cost often affects us. So that's another question we will try and respond in this session today. And lastly, I will talk about what would happen in terms of my plan if I am unable to get into any of my top choice university. So these are sort of the 5 questions we'll tackle today. And I just want to clarify right now that the session today primarily focuses on choosing and as well as admissions to local universities. What does mean is that हमारी जो आवाम है उसका say more than 90%, between 90% and 99.9% would still access local universities. And therefore, I want to make sure that this session we are focused on the local universities. As we get chance in future, we will also do a separate session on the international universities. But still, I would make some last comments towards the end about international universities as well. All right, so question is, what comes first, university or the field of study? And I think that's an important question we want to answer in this presentation today. So this is like a seesaw, right? Some people prefer university over field. Some people prefer field over university. I just want to do a quick input from people here. So if I have to ask you a question, what would you prefer? University or the field if you had a choice? You would prefer university over your field of study, which means that if you get into Pakistan's top university, you don't care what program you get into, or you would say, no, I want to get into a specific field. And of course, if I don't get into good university, I would still settle for a mediocre university. So what are your thoughts? What would you prefer, a university or field? And you can write down your answers in the chat box. Okay, so we have started receiving answers. So people are saying field first. All right. Very good. So majority is saying field first, and that's very intuitive, right? You would want to select a field first. You would want to know what subjects I want to study, and then you would want to select what universities I want to go into. Let me now tweak this question slightly. What actually happens in reality? Do people prefer the university first, or do they choose the field first? What happens in the reality? All right. So now the answers are changing. In reality, people are choosing university first. And so the most answers I'm receiving right now says we should select the field first. But the reality is that people are choosing university first. And that's why I wanted to show this seesaw to you, right? It's a balance that we have to apply when we are looking at university and preferred fields. And why I'm saying, so we have a dilemma here in Pakistan. In fact, we have two dilemmas. One is that the industry, the market, हमारे जो graduate जब अपना undergraduate करने के बाद market में जाते हैं to find out different jobs, market puts a premium on certain universities. And let me explain that what I mean by the term premium. So जब हम market जाते हैं कभी कुछ shopping करने के लिए, खरीदारी करने के लिए, so we want to purchase a certain thing, right? We want to purchase a piece of cloth, we want to purchase a device, we want to purchase any item. And so I want to compare that to a field of study, right? We want a certain people with certain field of studies, or we want to buy certain items. But when we want to buy a certain item, it is offered by many shops, right? There are some shops which are unbranded shops, there are some shops which are branded shops, right? And the branded shops would always put a premium on what they are selling. And people are willing to pay that premium price. So for example, अगर मुझे एक शलवार कुर्ता लेना है, it could be a men's शलवार कुर्ता, women's शलवार कुर्ता, I would say, okay, on average, a shalwar kurta can cost, a relatively good quality shalwar kurta can cost 2,500 to 3,000 rupees. 2,500 से 3,000 रुपए में एक reasonable shalwar kurta, चले आप बढ़ा दें, 4,000 रुपए में एक reasonable shalwar kurta आपको मिल जाएगा. But if you go to a branded shop, they will probably sell you the same quality of shalwar kurta at say 6,000 rupees at a much higher premium rate. And many of the people are willing to pay that premium cost. They will actually pay 50% higher cost to get that brand. And similarly, what happens in the industry today? When you're going to a job market, the job market would say, okay, if you are a graduate of computer science, or if you are a graduate of any other field, say business studies, I would pay you X thousand rupees as your starting salary. But if you are from a Y university, I would pay you an additional premium for that university. So that's what I mean by premium. And that's a dilemma, right? Market determines कि मैं किन universities को additional premium दूंगी और किन लोगों को premium नहीं दूंगी. So that's one dilemma we have to deal with here. The second dilemma that we have in our country is that there are a handful number of high quality universities, right? If I start counting on the top of my head, कि पाकिस्तान में कौन सी top quality universities हैं, be in medical, business studies, engineering, computer science, arts, social sciences, I think I'll start counting and probably I will stop in about next 10 to 12 seconds, which means that I will have to now think more about, okay, and then I have to evaluate my choices. कि अच्छा ये अच्छी university है भी कि नहीं है, am I overrating a university or not? So these are two big dilemmas. One, there are very, very few choices for students to select. And secondly, the second dilemma is that market puts a premium on certain select high quality universities. So what happens as a result of this dilemma? There's a consequence to it. The consequence is that your choice of university could potentially put you either at an advantage or a disadvantage. और ये बहुत सिंपल चीज़ है, राइट? कि अगर आप एक अच्छी यूनिवर्सिटी में जाएंगे तो आपके पास एडवांटेज ये है कि जो मार्केट आपको एक हाई प्रीमियम सैलरी देने को तैयार है, आप उसका एडवांटेज ले सकते हैं. अगर आप एक mediocre या lower quality, and again, I am not saying a mediocre or lower quality from my perspective, but from industry's perspective. From an industry's perspective, if you are going to a mediocre or a lower tier university, you automatically are putting yourself at some kind of disadvantage from the market, right? Because industry will not be willing to pay you a certain kind of premium. So there's a dilemma, and then there are consequences. However, there's also good news. And good news ye hai, even if you have certain disadvantages, which means that even if you have not had the chance or fortune of going to a very top quality university, you can still overcome with that disadvantage through sheer hard work, a lot of additional skills, and also possibly with better advanced qualifications. Which means कि अगर आपकी undergraduate degree for whatever reason, खुदा ना खास्ता आपकी undergraduate डिग्री किसी ऐसी यूनिवर्सिटी से है जो कि मार्केट के परस्पेक्टिव से टियर ए यूनिवर्सिटी नहीं है, टियर बी है, टियर सी यूनिवर्सिटी है, and that's what you have in your 4 years of undergraduate. You can still overcome that disadvantage to a lot of other hard work and skills. And let me go to the next slide to explain what I mean by this. So what does this premium on hard work and skills and added qualification mean? I want to show you 3 very, very simple graphs, and please don't catch me on the statistics of it or on the mathematics of it, but I want to just give you 3 very, very simple graphs. So let's look at the first graph. The first graph is showing that there are 2 trends, right? The blue line is showing a salary scale over a period of time for students which are coming out of top universities. The other color, the red color, is showing the salary trends for people coming out of other universities. And when I mean other universities, there's a lot of variation, of course. Some are what I say tier B universities, some are tier C universities. But on average, top universities will always have a higher salary rate. And on average, graduates of other universities will have lower salary rate. और मैं जो disadvantage की बात कर रहा हूँ, and this again I have just put down a scale from 2025 to 2035. So if you start your undergraduate studies this year or next year, you will graduate in 2025. And what is important to note is that right at the start, right at 2025, you see people coming out of top universities are actually starting on a higher salary from day one. And that's what I mean by premium. They already have a premium being paid by the market right at the start of their career, and that's an advantage they can carry forward throughout their life. और उसमें मैं again assume कर रहा हूँ कि बाकी सारे factors फिलहाल constant हैं दोनों की lives में. Let's look at the second graph, and this graph tries to explain a premium on hard work and skills, which means कि जो students top university से निकल के आते हैं, and if they are continuing their trajectory as they would continue in the first graph, they would continue going in a certain trajectory. They will start at a higher salary, they will continue to go and grow in this manner. But look at the other graph, look at the red line. Students or people or graduates who have started on a much lesser salary scale in 2025, however, with a lot of hard work, with a lot of added skills, with a lot of advanced qualifications, if they want, they can actually overcome those disadvantages and actually take over the blue line in about 4 or 5 years' time. And that's what I was telling as a good news in my last slide, right? Although there is a premium on university, but at the same time, industry is willing to put a premium on hard work and added skills as well. So students who have disadvantage in the early years, they don't have to lose heart. What they need to do is to continue to add skills, continue to work hard, and continue to get added qualifications so the market can give them an additional premium. However, life is not very, very simple, right? Of course, those who are coming out of the graduate schools are also hardworking, or good graduate schools, right? So they are also very hardworking. They are also adding a lot of skills. They are also adding a lot of qualifications. So if the people who are in top universities after graduation, if they also work equally hard, if they also add so many skills to their repertoire, they can still have much greater advantage than students who are coming out of mediocre or lower quality skills. But I call it a double premium, which means that if you are coming out of good university, you have an initial advantage, you have an initial premium. However, even if you are coming out of a good university, you cannot relax. You cannot just say that, okay, I have a degree from XYZ university, which is Pakistan's top 3 universities, and now I can relax and not continue to work hard or add skills. Because if that happens, you will then end up in what I am showing in the graph 2. So you have to continue to increase your skills, continue to hard work, so that you can continue to grow. Now, if you are coming out of good university, if you are continuing to work hard, industry will actually pay you a double premium, which means that you can actually enhance your salary at an exponential rate. हम जब आज के दौर में जब हम कोविड की बात करते हैं, we all now understand exponential growth, right? So that double premium would actually give you an exponential growth in terms of your market receptivity as well as what market is willing to pay. So I hope this graph tries to explain the concept of premium and how even if you have a certain disadvantage starting in your career because of your degree from not a high quality university, you can still overcome it with a lot of hard work and skills. That's the first point I wanted to make. So now back to the question of about what comes first, the field of study or the university. And so I want to tackle this question through this very, very simple matrix. You see that in this matrix, I put an x-axis and a y-axis. The x-axis is about your choice of field of study. The y-axis is about choice of university, right? And there are generally 4 possibilities. Either you can go into a choice of a university which is in a very high priority on your list, and you can also end up going into a field of study which is very high priority on your list. What would happen as a result? That's the ideal, right? अगर आपका एडमिशन किसी ऐसी यूनिवर्सिटी में होता है जो कि आपकी हाई प्रायोरिटी लिस्ट पर है और आपको एडमिशन उस फील्ड में मिल जाता है उस यूनिवर्सिटी में जो कि आपकी हाई प्रायोरिटी लिस्ट पर है, that's an ideal scenario, right? You should absolutely pursue that choice. So example लेते हैं, right? And I'll take some very, very rude examples, very crude examples in terms of examples. So say you want to do a bachelor's BBA from IBA, right? And IBA offers you an admission into BBA program. Excellent, right? That's okay. IBA was your first choice. You got into the BBA program. You were not offered admission by IBA into any other program, which might not be your first choice. That's an ideal scenario, and you should absolutely pursue that choice. Let's look at the second possibility, right? Okay, you are now ending up going into a university which is lower in your priority, but you get admission into a field which is, sorry, so you are going into a university which is high on priority, but you are going into a field which is low on priority. And I want to say, take an example of the same example. So you go into IBA, you are applying there. IBA does not offer you admission into the BBA program. They say, well, we have some seats available in the BBA MIS program. You are lower on the cutoff. Do you want to consider into the BBA MIS program? Now, that's a question, and that's a situation where you have to reflect. And what I'm recommending is that you have to consider, reflect, and then make a decision. Don't say yes, don't say no. But what I'm saying is consider, reflect, and decide. What I'm saying by consider, reflect, and decide. So what you have to see is how different this specific field of study is from your own field of study. Now, of course, you wouldn't want to be in a scenario where you were trying to be an engineer, but GIK did not give you admission into, say, BS in engineering program, but IBA offered you an admission to a BBA program. Now, if your field of choice was always engineering, but now you are, so let's in fact take an example of NUST, for example. So NUST is a better example because NUST offers engineering, but NUST also offers BBA. So for example, NUST says, well, we can't get you into an engineering program, but we will offer you an admission into a BBA program if you're interested. Now, NUST is in one of your top choice university, but you are interested in engineering. You are not interested in, say, a BBA program. So that's a difficult choice to make, right? Now, if you're applying to NUST, for example, and if you're trying to get into, say, mechanical engineering, and NUST say, well, we don't have space in mechanical engineering, but we have space in, say, telecom engineering, or we have space in some other related engineering program. And that's a choice you can consider. That's a choice you can reflect. Okay, how much mechanical engineering and telecom engineering courses have overlap? What are some of the common courses I can take? Is there a way I can go back to mechanical at the master's program? Are there some electives I can take to continue to study mechanical engineering? Is there a choice that NUST offers after, say, second year to allow me to go back to mechanical engineering? Now, these are some choices you can consider and decide. However, if there is a vast difference in the field of choice, I think then it's very, very difficult. So I cannot give you a very general guidance. It would vary from person to person. And that's where you have to seek a lot of advice from advisors. You have to seek a lot of advice from your friends, your professionals that you know in that field, and then make a decision. But what I'm saying is, if you're able to get into a university of high choice, but the field is relatively low on choice, don't absolutely reject, don't absolutely accept, but consider, reflect, and decide. Let's look at the third scenario. You get into a program which is of high choice. However, university is not of a very high choice. So let's take the same example, right? You got into a BBA program, for example, and I would in fact take a very other an example. In fact, let me take an example which is very prominent, right? So you are trying to get into a medical program, which is, say, MBBS, and a lot of students who want to do MBBS want to either go to Aga Khan University, or they want to go to various government medical colleges like Dow, Sindh Medical College, AKEB'P Medical College, Allama Iqbal Medical College. These are some sort of high quality medical colleges. And sometimes they don't get into it. And then they have to then get into some other medical college, which is relatively low on quality. And as we know, a lot of medical colleges sort of mushroomed into many parts of urban areas. Now, this is what I call a very high risk. And the reason I call high risk is, remember my last two slides. The market places a lot of premium on good university, right? If you are going into a lower quality university, you are starting at a position of disadvantage already. And so that's a decision you have to make very carefully. And I am saying some advice that I would say is, when you are coming into this situation, seek advice as much as you can. Talk to your school counselors, talk to advisors, talk to professionals. And I'm giving you another advice. I'm saying consider another attempt. And again, I'm giving you an example of, say, medical again. So I have seen people who failed to get admission to, say, Aga Khan University or Dow Medical College in the very first attempt. Instead of going for an option which is of a lower or mediocre quality university, they considered a reattempt, which means they said, let me try and apply for AKU again. Let me see what can I do if I can apply to government medical colleges again. And it's difficult to get to a government medical college in a second attempt because you are at a disadvantage. But there is no harm in considering, and I'm not saying you should do it, but if you think you have a strong profile, you just flunked into the interview, there was a very marginal difference in the cutoff and to what you had, then you can consider another attempt the next year. And I will talk about this more in detail later. But you should also consider the return on investment. And when I'm saying return on investment, you should have to consider how much cost I'm going to pay for this relatively lower quality of university, and how quickly I can recoup this cost after my graduation. So as I said earlier, again, the market pays a premium, right? Market gives a lot of premium to students going to good university. And when you are taking this high risk, there is always this consideration that market may not pay you enough. You might be investing a very, very high cost. And if you, especially if you are going to a lower quality, high cost private university, you are investing about 1.5, 2 million rupees for your 4-year education, and your return on investment is, at least in the first few years, might be very, very low. So all these factors you have to consider before you make a decision. And last is, you are going into a choice of university which is very, very low, as well as in the field of study which is very, very low. And let me tell you from my experience, from all the students that I've come across as part of the career guidance or later as part of university selection, let me say this with a very, very, very heavy heart. More than 50% of students actually fall into this category. And I can say this from experience as a fact, that a majority of students compromise not only on their choice of university, but they also compromise on their choice of field. And one reason that they give to me again and again is that I do not want to waste 1 year. मेरा यहाँ पे admission हो गया है. I have a lot of family pressure. I cannot afford to waste another year. And so I will go into whatever I have, and I will think later what I can do. Now, my advice is, if you actually choose that option, it's a waste of time and it's a waste of money, and try and avoid choosing that option. So in the last 3 slides, I have tried to respond to the very, very first question that we were trying to address to this session, that field of study is important or university is important, and what you should consider first. And I hope I have tried, I've answered some of your questions, but I'll take some questions later. So let's move to the second question. When should I start thinking about universities? And this is a 4-step approach. And I will just quickly, very, very quickly take you through these 4 steps. So these 4 steps are exploration, preparation, application, and decision. And I'll take you through these 4 steps very, very quickly. So what do I mean by exploration? By exploration, I mean that you have to start exploring. So now my assumption is that you already know what field of study you want to go in. And at least broadly you have decided. Broadly you have decided कि मेरा interest medical के area में है, या engineering के area में है, या applied sciences के area में है, या business studies के area में है, या finance के area में है. Because these are some subjects you also are selecting when you are in your A levels and intermediate. So broadly you have decided what are some larger areas I want to go into. Once you know that, you will start exploring universities already. So in the exploration step, I am suggesting to do these quick 3 things. One, explore universities. So when I say explore university, that really means going to university websites, understand what programs they are offering. Where possible, try and attend open houses by university. Try and visit these universities, right? Many universities organize these open forums, visits. Try and attend, try and explore those universities, talk to their alumni, talk to their current students, and try and explore as much as you can about this university. Within this step, second sub-step you should do is prepare a short list of universities. So once you've explored, say about 10, 15 universities, try and create a short list of universities which are very high on your priority list. And then try and understand their admission criteria, timelines, and cost. And that's an important part of exploration, because some universities are very, very expensive, some are not that expensive. But as you are exploring universities, keep a track record, and I'll explain this later. As you are exploring, try and maintain an Excel sheet of all the information you are collecting so that you can analyze it later. So as part of the first step, you should be exploring it, the universities that you are looking at. And what are the timelines to it? So I would suggest that when you are towards the end of your metric, say you are sort of just about appearing for your exams, or you have finished appearing for exam, or you are just finished appearing for your O-level exam, that time duration that you have after your exams and before the beginning of your A-levels or your 11th grade, that's a time of about 4 to 5 months. You should be exploring as much as you can about the university. Step 2 is preparation. And when I say preparation, that means most universities now ask for admission test. So you should start preparing for admission test or whatever the requirements are. And also start developing your requisite profile. And what do I mean by a requisite profile? Now, more and more public universities don't give you admission only on the basis of your percentage in intermediate or on the basis of admission test and interview. They are looking at a profile. So universities like, say, Aga Khan University, universities like LUMS, universities like AKEB'P University, they are looking at your overall profile. So how much did you participate in your extracurricular activities? What kind of community services you have done? What kind of leadership opportunities you have used? And so when you are in your A levels and when you are in your first year intermediate, and if you've already done the first step, you understand what the admission requirements are, you have to start developing your profile. So if you are targeting, say, AKU, or if you are targeting LUMS or AKEB'P University or any other top university in Pakistan, which are private especially, you have to start building your profile. So you have to start participating in various extracurricular within the university, do a lot of project work, attend summer camps, try and take leadership role, so that when after a year or so you have to start applying for universities, you already have a profile that you can present in your application. And that's an important part of planning for university admission. You don't want to be in a situation where you are in your second year or end of second year, and then you come to realize, oh, isme ye requirements thi, but I have nothing to show in my profile. So that those 2 years are absolutely critical. I'm not saying that O levels is not important, 9th and 10th is not important, but if you have missed that board, you always still have 2 years to catch up. And so when you should be doing this, what I'm saying is that you should be doing this in your you should start doing it in your intermediate first year, as well as so also use your summer break. When I'm saying summer break, that's between end of your first year or end of your A1. You should be using that summer break to do a lot of interesting project work, community services, etc., to build your profile. Third step is application process, and so really that step means that you should start submitting your applications. You should start appearing for assessments. So a rule of thumb is that all the universities that you have shortlisted, try and submit as many applications as you can, try and appear as many assessment processes as you can. Generally, university आपस में, there's an unsaid rule where universities try and coordinate ताकि उनके admissions आपस में overlap ना हो, so that students are not competing for similar kind of universities. But be careful with timelines and admission timelines. And for many universities who are offering scholarships or financial aid, they often ask for applications when you are applying for admission. So be very careful about it. Don't miss the timelines. Many universities require you to apply for scholarships and financial aid when you are applying for university admission. In some cases, universities also ask you to apply for scholarships afterward, after the admissions have been announced. But a lot of university ask you to apply for scholarships. So you have to keep that in mind. And generally, Pakistan may, just to explain to you very quickly, there are 3 cycles of admissions that you should be mindful about, because a lot of universities that fall into the 4th category I spoke in the last slide are the ones who have missed admission timelines. उनको बाद में याद आता है कि ओ मुझे तो पता ही नहीं था कि इसके admissions हो गए हैं, मैं तो exams खत्म होने का wait कर रहा था. And many universities have actually already done admissions before that. So there are 3 cycles. The private universities usually run into 2 cycles, right? So there are some universities like LUMS, like AKEB'P University, there are several other private universities which would announce their admission cycle before your A levels or intermediate exams. So they announce admissions around January, they conduct exams around March, and they announce admissions by April. They often call it an early admission cycle. So you should keep an eye out in this around November, December, or January for admission announcement. The second cycle that private universities do is around your exams time or immediately after your exams. So around May, early June, where they announce for admissions. They have a very tight deadline for admission, application deadline. And then they do their interviews and admission process around end of June and July. So these are 2 cycles that the private universities run. The public university generally run their admission cycles after the results of intermediate have been announced. So general normal cycle में inter के exams जो हैं वो around May हो जाते हैं, results around September तक आ जाते हैं, and these universities announce admissions around end of September, early October, and results are announced by end of December, and they start their classes in January or February. So these are 3 cycles. Now, of course, the dilemma is that private universities run their cycles much in advance. Public universities run their cycle much later. And sometimes when students who, although have public universities as a top priority, then struggle to decide कि अगर मेरा private university में admission हो गया है तो क्या मैं इसमें admission लूँ, ना लूँ, public का wait करूँ और फिर उसमें admission लूँ, खुदा ना खास्ता अगर मेरा public में admission नहीं हुआ तो I will be wasting 2 admissions. Now that's a difficult decision, and we'll talk about this and hopefully in the next couple of slides. And so last step is to make a decision, which means that you have to evaluate the results of admissions and what options you have. And depending on what options you have, where have you got admissions and what timelines you have to respond to them, you have to seek a lot of advice. You have to evaluate a lot of options. You have to start applying for scholarships and see what the decisions are. Sometimes you have to drop certain universities because they are expensive. You don't get sufficient financial aid. So the decisions of scholarships also is a key step. And then you eventually make a decision about which university you want to go to. And so timelines in terms of decision is about between end of June and early August for private universities, and between November and January for public universities. So these are so again, if you look at it, this is broadly a 2 to 2.5 year timeline that you're looking at, which means कि अगर आपने university selection का process बहुत seriously शुरू करना है, it's not something that you start thinking about in your second year or A2 or after your exams. It's something that you have to start thinking at least 2 years in advance and start planning for it. The better you plan, the better you are prepared to come up with different choices and make an informed decision. So moving forward, so next question is, how do I evaluate my choices, right? मैंने जो है वो बहुत सारी priority list बना ली है. How do I evaluate my choices? Now there are multiple ways of looking and evaluating. So I'm not saying how to evaluate my decisions after I've got admissions, but I'm saying how do I evaluate my choices after I've done a lot of exploration and after I've created a list of universities. There are multiple ways of analyzing and evaluating universities, but we will focus on sort of 2 major ways of evaluating. One is to look at university from a lens of public and private universities. So in many cases, people prefer public over private, and there are several reasons, and we will discuss it. But then the second way is looking at certain qualitative parameters to evaluate your choices. And I will talk about these 2 just now. So the first parameter is to understand that there are differences between public universities and there are difference between private university. And it's very, very important to understand the difference between the 2. So I've just listed down some evaluation factors. This is not a very exhaustive list. These are some key factors based on which you can evaluate certain choices. So one is cost. Now, in general, public universities are low cost, private universities are high cost. So that's an important factor to consider. Public universities सस्ती होती हैं, private universities महंगी होती हैं, और private universities में भी आपको बहुत सारी range मिलेगी. There are certain private universities which would cost you about 100 to 150,000 rupees a year. There are also private universities which can cost you about $1 million a year. So there's a lot of variation, but in general, public सस्ती होती है और private महंगी होती है. The second evaluation factor is the admission criteria, which means that public university very heavily rely on your results of intermediate and A-level exams. And when I say very heavily, they may still have their admission test, but they have a very, very heavy weightage of your intermediate results. Private universities can have several criteria. The lowest weightage they put is on your intermediate result. They look at their own admission process. They look at their own interviews. Some universities look at your overall application in terms of how holistic profile you have in terms of extracurricular, etc. But you have multiple criteria. And When I am saying admission criteria is an important consideration, the reason I am saying is in terms of public universities, all your eggs are in one basket, which means कि अगर आपके इंटर के results अच्छे हैं, you have a higher chance of getting to a good program in a good public university. But अगर आपके intermediate के results अच्छे नहीं हैं, you have say a mediocre B grade or you have a low B grade, you have a very, very lower chance of going to a good public university and a good program. However, if you are trying and targeting a private university, you still can spread your eggs in multiple baskets, which means that agar you are lacking in one criteria, say your percentage, you can still cover it up with your admission test result. You can still cover it up with your good interview in the process. You can still cover it up with a better overall profile. So you still have a lot of ways to cover up certain weaknesses with your strength. So that's an important thing. Third important consideration is admission timelines, right? So public universities admissions happens way later after your exams, right? So generally they would happen 4 months after your exams. Private universities do it either before or immediately after your exams time. So which also means that private universities minus the medical universities, they all will start their universities even before your exams results have come out. So it's a choice you have, right? Private universities are expensive, but they also start early. Public universities are cheaper. They start, if I get into a private university, I have to pay the fees to get to confirm my admission, but I have to pay for 4 years, which is very, very expensive. But if I have cheaper, but it happens much later. So timelines is a critical factor you have to evaluate. Chauथा sorry, I've lost my connection. Let me just quickly share my screen again. I just want to make sure that I'm back and I'm audible. Munir, can you confirm?
Yes, it's visible and you're audible.
All right, sorry, I just got disconnected. So quota में देखिए important चीज ये है कि public universities always have a quota. When I say quota, which means they would either have a provincial quota based on domicile, which means that if a university is situated in Sindh, they will give preference to students who are based on Sindh. But there are universities which also have quota based on exam boards. So for example, NED ka quota system is based on which examination board you have graduated from. If you have graduated from, say, Karachi's intermediate board, you have probably chance to get into 80% seat. But if you are a graduate of Aga Khan University Examination Board, or if you are a graduate of A-levels, you have limited number of seats to apply for. So public university will always have a quota, and they are publicly stated. They say that we have a quota. Private universities, however, rarely have a quota. And even if they have a quota, they don't announce it. And what do I mean by this? So a lot of private universities have what we call a diversity quota, which means that although they have a very equal merit, they always try and have some kind of diversity. So they would not want that our 100% student population A-level se aa jaye. Yeah, so they will always have an unset quota for students, A-level students. They would not want that our sare students एक particular city se aa jaye. So they would have a geographic diversity quota to ensure that there are people from different parts of the country. Similarly, they might have a certain socioeconomic quota, right? So they don't announce it, but they have mostly not announced diversity quota to make sure that they are as much diverse as possible. And last two important things are that campuses, right? So public university would usually have large campuses and multiple campuses. Private universities will have between 1 and 3 campuses. And when I'm saying why campus is important, private universities are also, because they have large campuses, they have large facilities in terms of equipment, labs, non-academic spaces for students to go around and enjoy life. Private university, depending on how many campuses they have, they may not have a lot of spaces outside of classroom and academic facilities. So it's sometimes they are, some universities have very suffocating spaces. They are in one building or a bungalow, or they are in a one large tall building, and they are not really a world-class campuses. So that's an important consideration, because once you are coming out of a good school, a large school, sometimes university could be a very suffocating space for you. And lastly, you have to understand the political environment. So many public universities have very established student unions. They are politically very volatile. Administration often have a lack of control on what kind of non-academic activities universities get into. However, private universities usually have a stable political environment. Students are focused more on studies and don't really get a lot involved in political activities. So public university has a certain culture, certain advantages to it. Private universities have a certain advantage to it. And I know a lot of students who are coming out of private schooling system often struggle to adjust into a public system, surely because of the culture that public university have, or the environment they have. So this is an important way of evaluating the university. The second parameter that I want to sort of quickly discuss, and I would not go into details of it because we have a lack of time, but these are some quality parameters that you can look at. And I will just make very quick statements about some of these parameters. So admission process. The more rigorous a university will have an admission process, which means multiple processes, the better will be the quality of that university. So there are certain universities which are walk-in university, which are testament to the quality of that university. So more rigorous the assessment, the better the quality. In terms of recognition and accreditation, you would know that there are, and I would tell you, there are hundreds of universities in Pakistan that exist, which are currently operating, which are actually blacklisted by HEC, right? And so you have to be very careful when you are selecting these universities. My advice also is don't go after rankings. There are multiple institutions in Pakistan that offer rankings of universities, but let me tell you, they have no credibility, and you should not look at those rankings. But an important consideration is to look at accreditation, which means that medical universities have accreditation bodies, engineering universities have accreditation body like Pakistan Engineering Councils. Make sure that the university which you are choosing have accreditation from these accreditation bodies, and they are for all batches. So let me give you an example. So Pakistan Engineering Council gives accreditation to all the engineering programs in Pakistan, but they also evaluate programs every year, which means that it is very possible that University A says that we have accreditation with, say, PEC, but they may only have accreditation for students who have graduated in 2016 and 17, but they may not have accreditation of students graduating in 2018 and 19, which is an indicator of the fact that their quality is not consistent, and there's a bit of risk involved in going to those universities. So that's an important research you have to do as part of their exploration, right? So that's an important consideration. You should look at the faculty profile. What are their qualifications? How many of them have PhDs? Even if they have a PhD, what universities they have gone to? Just having a foreign qualification does not mean that's a good university. You can still go outside Pakistan and go to a very mediocre university and have a qualification. So look at carefully about their qualifications. Look at their campus and facilities. Go and try and visit those facilities. See how conducive they are to learning. Look at their curriculum and courses. And one important tip I want to give: look at the courses that universities offering in a certain department or division. Now, there are universities which are within their one department, they would offer a lot of programs which are similar sounding, right? So they will have one program which is called BSc Business Studies. The second program they will offer is Business Studies and Accounts. The third program they will offer is Accounts and Economics. The fourth option they will offer is Accounts and Finance. So within a certain department, they would offer multiple programs. And within these programs, you will only have 5 or 6 or 8 courses different. Majority of them are similar. And one reason that they are trying to do this is to get more and more students enrolled in different programs, because sometimes they have only approvals to offer certain number of seats in a program. So using the same faculty members, using the same classroom, using the same facilities, they are trying to expand their offerings and getting more and more students in their universities. So be very, very careful about some of these universities. Also look at what alumni and students talk about these universities. Generally, they are your best people to give to feedback on. And while you are using social media like Facebook and LinkedIn and other spaces, try and connect with these alumni and students and get feedback. Don't go to any university blindly. Try and seek feedback from them. Also try and understand market absorption, how quickly their graduates are taken by the university. And one way of looking at it is that most graduates coming out of university tend to make their LinkedIn profiles. So try and search where are the graduates of 2019, 2020 placed, or whatever year you are trying to graduate in. Try and see where the recent graduates are placed. Good organizations, poor organizations, and that will be very, very helpful. Look at the transport and hostel facilities, especially if you are trying to go outside of your own city. And one tip and one important indicator is good universities would usually subsidize transportation and hostel costs. Universities which are in there for money making will not subsidize transportation and will actually charge you on actual cost basis. That's the one tip which I've come across from my experience. And thirdly, and again, very, very important, is to look what their costs are, what are their financial aids, what are the scholarships. And again, rule of thumb is the better a good university, a top quality university will always have very, very generous scholarships and financial aid options. And so that's an important indicator to look at. If there are private universities which are offering very less scholarships or very easy scholarships, you can always question their credibility. And so when you have evaluated, what I'm saying is that evaluate each university on each of the parameter. And one way I try to do is I put a rating. So I evaluate each one on a rating scale. So where would you put admission process of a university on a rating scale of 1 to 10? 10 being very, very rigorous, 1 being very, very lazy and very, very lax. So try and rate and then add up which university has a score less than 50%, which universities have a score between 50 and 70%, which universities have a score higher than 70%. And that would help you prioritize your choices. And once you have prioritized your choices, start gathering information on your at least top 5 choices. If you have 7 choices, 8 choices, very good. But at least pick top 5 choices and start gathering information about their admission timelines, about their scholarships, about admission criteria. And once you have developed these choices, once you have gathered information, talk to people, talk to advisors, talk to family members who understand, not family members who don't understand it, but talk to family members who understand these things, talk to professionals, and try and prioritize as much as you can. And lastly, and as I said this earlier, all this information you are collecting in terms of rating, prioritization, organize them nicely into an Excel sheet so you can again refer to them time and time again as you need. And so last 2 very, very quick questions and slides. And I'm aware of the time that I'm running about 10 minutes late. So I'll quickly go through these 2 slides and we will then open for questions. So what if I'm unable to afford the universities which I am vying for? So let's look at these universities. Within the medicine, AKU or government medical colleges, within engineering, NUST, within engineering, GIK, within engineering, LUMS, and within business studies, LUMS and IBA. These are sort of your universities which would come right top on your list if you are trying to go to these universities. And what's common in these universities? One thing which is very common about these universities is that they are very, very high quality, but they are also very hard to get in. And what I am showing you in the 3rd column is that all these universities have an have excellent scholarships and financial aid options. To the extent where I would say that most of these universities actually have a needs blind admission. What that means that what these universities are giving you is a very, very simple message. You work hard to get into these universities and they will take care of your financial need. Now, what I hear from people is a very, very easy way out. Oh, I don't want to apply to NUS because it's very expensive. Oh, I don't want to apply to GIK or LUMP because they are very expensive. I cannot afford them. That's a very easy way out from competition. That's escape you are trying to get. My simple message is if you can target top quality universities, there's almost a 90% guarantee that if you get into those universities, you can get some kind of a lot of financial aid from those universities to be able to afford. What is important is plan well and plan in advance. Prepare to get into those top universities. And if you are able to do these two things, affordability should be least of your concerns moving forward. So again, if you give yourself 2 years of time, prepare well, apply to these top universities. Financial aid is something that should not be an issue. However, if you are going to a mediocre university, a tier B university, then scholarships, etc., or if you don't have very good grades, or if you don't have very good profile, then you struggle with the scholarships in short and long term. And this is my last slide, and then I'll end with this. What if I'm unable to get into any of my top choice universities? So I prepared well. I really worked hard. I applied to these universities, but मेरा इनमें admission नहीं हुआ. What do I do? So 4 simple steps. First is to critique yourself, which means there is something that you have not done right. It is hardly conceivable that you have done everything perfectly well and you did not get in. So it's important to acknowledge that weakness, self-critique, and try and understand what is it that you have not done right. There is no point in blaming your bad luck for not getting in. Once you have done the self-critique, I would suggest ask yourself, what did you learn from the experience, right? Where did you go wrong? Can I correct that wrong? Which means that, is it something I could have done better? And when I say what you have done wrong, it could be a poor admission test, something you did not do well in the interview, you did not develop a good profile, you were very lax in the way you filled the application form, you missed the timelines. There could be anything, there could be different things, right? And so it's important to reflect and learn from it. And then once you have reflected, evaluate your options. What do I need to fix it? Do I need to improve my grades? Which means that, does that mean I have to reappear for certain exams and papers? Does that mean that I have to reappear in certain admission process again next year to improve my chances? And again, I can easily give you example of, say, Aga Khan University. I know so many students who passed the admission test of AKU, but missed out on the interview process. They reflected, they tried to improve on certain areas, they reapplied next year, and then they aced all the processes and got into Aga Khan University's medical college and nursing program. So people take that route through, right? Or third option is that I make a compromise. I make a compromise on my field or university. And I'm not saying this is a choice you should take, but I'm saying this is part of the evaluations you are doing when you are selecting the university and a program. And when you are evaluating your options, there are some considerations you should take. And this is sort of my take-home tips, right? So first tip is, don't be scared of wasting a year. हमें लोग अक्सर जो है, people, and as I said in my that matrix where the fourth option is wasting time and money, I hear from so many people taking up that option because they say, oh, मेरा एक साल ज़ाया हो जाएगा, I should not reappear for exams, I should not try and repeat certain exams because मेरा एक साल ज़ाया हो जाएगा. Now let me tell you, in your career spanning between 35 to 40 years, 1 year is only about 2 to 3% of your entire career life. Now, but that 1 year is so critical, so important in terms of what you choose. That decision can impact your complete life. And so evaluating that 1 year, considering some smart options is very, very critical to to have an impact for the rest of your life. Second consideration that I would also urge you to take is consider your family's financial situation. Because sometimes when you have a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, sometimes I know people go ahead with plan C and D, but reattempt plan A and B, which means that sometimes they go into their fifth choice university, start doing this, start going to that university, attend a semester, but apply again to their first choice university. And then if they are able to go to their first choice university, they drop out of their fifth choice university. Of course, that means there is some financial implication to it. But if your financial situation of the family allows it, that's an important consideration for you to make. So I think, and what I'm saying is, again, as a last consideration, be aware that in your life, you will change your career 4 and 5 times, which means that you may start in a career which is not your first choice. You may go to a university which is not your first choice, but always remember that life will give you many, many, many opportunities. And you will always have a chance to come back. But as long as you don't lose heart, you are committed to your long-term goals, you will always have an opportunity to come back to achieving your goals. So that's very important, to stay committed to your long-term goals and objectives. So I think with that, I will end my session. As I said earlier, I take much longer than I should, but I will now open up the floor for questions.
Okay, thank you, Salman. We have quite a few questions coming in. Before I start that, a couple of things. First, the poll is up. Please give your feedback. That will help us improve our sessions and improve our outreach also. Second, there are a few questions that have come in which are not directly related to today's session. For example, questions related to international universities or international programs, questions about specific universities and specific programs that we may take if we have time in the end, and questions relating to scholarships, specific questions. So there were some general guidelines regarding scholarships in the session, but specific questions we will not be able to entertain regarding scholarships during this Q&A session. So I'll quickly start off with the Q&A. Now the first question that I would like your comments on is, you talked about building a profile and building your resume. Could you just talk about this in more detail, and especially now when students are stuck at their homes, they cannot be involved, and probably in the foreseeable future, they will not be able to participate in any community activities or any other outdoor activities. How do they build their profile during this time?
So very good question. And when I say profile, let me give you an example of, say, my own university, AKEB'P University, right? Or you can take an example of, say, universities like Aga Khan Education Board or LUMS. Now, some of these universities don't entirely rely on your results in intermediate or your results in admission test, because that's only an indicator of primarily your aptitude, right? Your aptitude and your academic attitude. Now, increasingly, universities are looking at assessment of certain skills that you have. So whether do you have leadership skills? Do you have critical thinking skills? Do you have thinkings of taking initiatives? Now, these are some examples of skills I have, I'm sharing. And now, how do they evaluate these skills? They evaluate these skills based on certain evidences that students are able to produce, which means that they are not asking you a theoretical question about what do you think about leadership, but they're asking you, what have you done something to demonstrate leadership? And so now question is, how do I demonstrate it? Now, I can demonstrate leadership by saying that in my school or in my university, in my college, I was the president of XYZ student club. If I want to demonstrate my critical thinking skills, I would say, oh, I took this fundraising campaign during the COVID 2000, where I evaluated that within my neighborhood, there are some domestic workers which are struggling, and I try to raise certain funds for them. And again, I could not have distributed that myself because I would get exposed to it. So I found these XYZ innovative ways of doing this thing, right? That shows the critical thinking ability, taking initiative. So you could say, oh, during the COVID-19 period, I was at home for about 3-4 months. I decided to take these courses on Coursera to try and improve my skills or improve my knowledge in other areas of knowledge. That's an initiative. So how through certain evidences, you are able to demonstrate that you are not just a geek, or you are not just someone who is academically strong, but also someone who thinks broadly and is able to develop certain skill sets and critical thinking skills that you can demonstrate. And more universities, not just outside of Pakistan, but also in Pakistan, are asking these specific questions as part of their application form, as well as in the interviews. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. The next question is, how do we know what universities are available in any specific list? Or for example, if you talked about engineering universities, so how do we know if a certain university that says that it's an engineering university is actually accredited by or approved by the PEC? Similarly for medical universities, etc.
So there's very, very simple. So for example, right now, Pakistan Engineering Council maintains the list of all such universities on their website, including what batches have been accredited. Secondly, universities are also supposed to publish this information on the website. Actually, they are issued certificates, and you always have a right to demand universities to ask for that certificate from universities. But if you go, so let me now spell out these bodies, right? So previously what was called Pakistan Medical and Dental Council, it's now called Pakistan Medical Association. They are supposed to accredit all the universities offering medicine programs. Pakistan Engineering Council are supposed to accredit Engineering Council. There's a body called NCEAC that does computer sciences program. There's a body called Pakistan Nursing Council that does nursing program. There's a body which is, I think, called Pakistan Pharmacy Association or Council that does pharmacy program. So most of these programs have to be accredited by the local bodies, and all of them publish these lists.
Okay. Thank you. There's another question regarding the possible effects of COVID-19 on the fall cycle, the fall admission cycle of universities, or the upcoming spring cycle. Do you think there will be any significant changes in timelines, requirements, etc.?
So now, again, myself being part of university, I can also talk about first-hand experience. So a lot of universities are still going ahead with the admission processes. So a lot of private universities have already, which I spoke about, which are offering in the first cycle, they had already announced their admissions and they are going ahead with the process. But I think what is happening right now is Higher Education Commission is talking to a lot of universities, in fact, all the universities, trying to come up with one uniform policy for Pakistan, which means that universities will have to comply with whatever policy Higher Education Commission comes up with. Now, every Higher Education Commission is heavily relying on the fact that there will be exams in June for the intermediate. Hopefully results would be out by August and September. Universities can provide conditional admissions, start classes in August, September, and then confirm. Right now, as things stand, given that intermediate exams can still happen in June, which is the June and early July, the admissions will still happen as per timeline, at least for the private universities and hopefully for public universities. However, if the situations for the COVID gets worse and intermediate exams could not be done, then I would believe that Higher Education Commission will come out with a uniform policy all across Pakistan and universities will be required to comply with it.
Okay. Um, uh, I know you discussed in a lot of detail regarding shortlisting, but we have received a couple of questions regarding sort of if you have a short list of 4 or 5 universities, how do you select your choice university? So I'll club those questions together. First of all, should we have separate shortlists for private and public universities? The second is, if there are two universities, for example, Habib and FAST, both offer good computer sciences programs, how do we choose one between them? And the third one is, if I have lower grades, obviously my options would not be top tier universities. So how do I make my choice in that case?
So again, as I had spoken about that slide in the quality parameters, it would be foolish to look at only one or two criteria to choose a university. So let me give you an example. So for example, just example you took, right? FAST and Habib University. Now, if you compare these two universities, they both offer computer science program, right? And I am not going to make any judgment right now which one is better than the other, because I would in fact say that this answer will be different for two different students, because they will have a different kind of evaluation based on what they learn about this university. So for some students, now again, Habib University and FAST University have two different course outline for how they teach computer science program. Habib University is a liberal arts university with a different mindset in the way they teach computer university. FAST has a different course and outline to it. FAST is a well-established university. Habib University is a relatively new university. FAST University has more established alumni. Habib University has a fewer number of graduates with alumni. FAST, Habib University is much more expensive, but has very generous financial aid program. FAST has not as generous financial aid, but a lot more seats as well, right? Habib University takes about 75 computer science students every year. FAST takes many, many more than that. So you have to consider all of this. Where do you have your chances high and lower? And I'm not saying you have to choose one or the other. Apply to both and see how the results come. As I said earlier, if there is a university which is in your top priority in terms of 5-7 universities, apply to as many as you can, as long as they are in high on your priority. Once you start getting decision, then you can sort of plug in more critical factors, right? You can put a factor like fees. You can put a factor like how far that university from it. You can put a factor in like what the university environment is like. What are the kind of financial aid I'm getting? Even if there's a 70% financial aid and I have to pay 30%, can my parents on a year-by-year basis for 4 years commit to pay that fees? How many siblings, younger siblings do I have for which my parents have to pay the fees? So all these financial consideration, etc., then would come into play as you are getting admission announcements with scholarship results. So one part of it is planning and preparation, and then you can then plug in certain more factors as you are coming towards the decisions of it.
Okay. One more question is relating to boards, examination boards for matric and intermediate or O levels or high school generally. How do they affect your chances at universities?
So I should have spoken about this when I was comparing public and private universities. So in general, if you, as I said, अगर आप public university में जा रहे हैं, they have a specific quota. That's one part of it. So, for example, NED has a quota for different examination boards, right? So if you are part of Karachi Examination Board, if you are deciding between, say, Aga Khan Education Examination Board and Karachi Examination Board, and your first choice university turns out to be NED for various for reasons like program, right? There are certain engineering program that only NED offers, but not many other universities offer, right? And so if that's the choice of university, you have to be aware that from an AKU examination board, you have a limited number of seats. From Karachi Examination Board, you have many, many more seats. However, if you are, say, applying to a private university like, say, IBA or AKU or LUMS, You have to also be aware that the kind of critical thinking and leadership skills and kind of evaluation criteria they look at, you will be better preparing yourself through AKU examination board or A levels than you would to a regular metric Karachi board examination board process. So that's a point you have to be aware. Similarly, if you are coming from O and A levels background, you have to be mindful. You have to be mindful that when you come to equivalency, and so even if you had 3 A stars in your A levels and 7 A's in O levels, you would still have certain percentages lost during equivalency. And especially if you have mixed grades like 2 A's and 1 B in A levels and 6 A's and 3 B's in O levels, even those are good grades on an independent scale. As soon as you convert them, you would fall in somewhere which is about 75 to 80%. And if you are trying to vie for public universities admission, heavily rely on your exam results, there is slight disadvantage you have, especially if you don't have outstanding grades. If you have outstanding grades, you don't have to worry a lot. But if you have mixed grades, you need to be aware that there are certain disadvantages that you would carry when you are applying for public universities. So choice of board is very, very important in terms of what universities you are planning for, are they public or private, and these cater for it.
There's one more question. How does self-finance work in government universities?
All right, so self-finance works in many ways. Some are very clean ways, some are not very clean ways. So the clean ways is very, very simple. Cleanest way ये होता है कि जब आपको, so say for example, let's take an example of Dow University. So Dow University, for example, has let's say 200 or 100 seats in their MBBS program, right? So let's say they have about 100 approved seats in their medical program. What they would probably do is get approval for 50 additional seats for self-finance or 25 self-finance seats. So those students who are on the top in the merit, say 100 students, they will all get into their merit seats. But students who are between 101 and 125 would still have a chance to go into Dow Medical College on a self-finance seat. And self-finance seat, there's a crude way of saying it, which actually means buying your seat. So you buy a seat by paying extra money. But of course, which also means that you are still on a relatively good merit. But now you have to pay an extra admission fee and a lot more higher fees than a regular student. So you are buying that seat because you were marginally, not very, but marginally lower. And so you buy that seat. Similarly, NED has a lot of self-finance seats. So a lot of public universities have self-finance seats. And the reason they have these self-finance seats is because they want to generate certain revenue. Not always government supports them with all kinds of funding. So that's the cleanest way of using a self-finance seats. But let me tell you, self-finance seats are almost as expensive as any private university. An unclean way of getting into a self-finance seat is to know someone in that university who will sort of quietly tell you that let me talk to person XYZ and see if I can get you higher on the merit. So they will play around the merit list, bring you higher on the merit on say 122, and then they say, oh, now you are on a higher merit and you can buy this seat. That's sort of an unclean way. I'm not saying that happens every year, but it happens. And I'm not saying we should be pursuing it. But if you are relatively higher on merit, and if you don't get an offer for self-finance, the reason is someone lower on the merit list, but better connections actually got those seats.
Okay. A last question or rather a comment. The session today, the webinar today primarily focused on getting into undergraduate programs. how different is the situation for master's programs? Do we need a completely separate webinar on this, or can we briefly touch on this now?
So masters, the reason I think we can have a separate webinar on it, surely, but I think the factors I mentioned today, some of those factors impact your undergraduate admission. But as soon as you come into the master's program, the factors change immediately, right? So sometimes your intermediate results don't matter anymore. Sometimes they look at your undergraduate GPA. Sometimes they look at your work experience. There are different criteria depending on what kind of program you are getting in. Are you getting into an executive program, a regular program, an evening program? Sometimes admission criteria for evening program is different from morning program. But I think one thing which is very consistently there across different universities, especially private, as you move towards the master's program, the financial aid and scholarship possibilities decrease, which also means that financial planning becomes a key consideration in what kind of master's program you are choosing. And so we could potentially have a separate webinar on the master's admissions and university. But what I would say in a nutshell is that the factors differentiate. And also an important consideration is that masters are very, very specialized programs. So University A may be offering 10 master's program from a certain department, but the likelihood is that only 1 or 2 programs would be very, very good because they heavily rely on the kind of faculty you have available to teach those specialized programs. So that's an important consideration.
Okay. I think this is it. We have run out of time. In fact, we are over time. Thank you very much, everyone. I see that there are some questions still coming in. Unfortunately, we won't be able to address them, but there's one thing that I would strongly recommend that you should consider is that the video of this session, the video recording of this session will be available on our YouTube channel. You should go there because there are a lot of questions that were coming in during the session, and even now they have already been answered in the main webinar. So I would recommend that you go back to that video and have a look at it. And maybe it will help you out. Please do complete the poll, and thank you very much. If there are any questions that are unanswered, we'll have a look at them and we'll try to answer them in our future webinars. Thank you.
I just want to quickly add, Amir Ali here, that the PowerPoint, we would be making this available on the